for the opportunity.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Happy to have you here. And obviously, it was almost a year ago, wasn't it? Because you were out in Dubai, and was it the guest one, or was it for the Club UAE talk?
I think it was the guest talk where they ran the Collab UAE event afterwards, and then I think we connected. I think you did a presentation. Mate, do you know it may even have been 2 years ago. I don't know whether it was.
I think it was 2 years because it was on the big stage. I remember now.
Yeah, I think it was on 2 years ago. Yeah,
that's a long time. I know. Crazy. Anyway, Simon, thank you so much for joining me today on the International Classroom podcast. Whereabouts in the world do we find you?
So I'm joining you from Harrogate in England today, sunny North Yorkshire, in fact.
I'm going to say, is everyone I've spoke to recently said about the UK is like sunny, and it's always such a surprise to most people, especially this time of year.
Oh, it is. We've had a few rainy weeks, I have to admit, but it's certainly, it's turned over the last few days, so it's always nice. Particularly, autumn's good in the UK, I think, but unless it's raining too heavily.
Anytime it rains in the UK, it's never good. It is never good. So for our listeners and for our viewers, how would you like to introduce yourself to them?
So I'm Simon. I am the co-founder of Pobble, a former classroom teacher and deputy head here in the UK. Started my Pobble journey about 10 years ago, so I guess I'm an EdTech founder now, but probably wearing lots of different hats, I have to say.
Because we were just talking a minute ago, weren't we, in terms of, it was 2 years ago, you were out in Dubai speaking at the Club UAE event for guests, which is, funny enough, just kind of a couple of weeks around the corner now.
Yeah.
What inspired you to transition then from the classroom and working within, I say education, but within the parameters of a school, to then create Pobble? What inspired that, and how has the journey been for you?
Well, we haven't got hours, so I'll try and condense it into a few moments. But I think that the start of the story was I was a teaching deputy head. So, and I say that because, senior leadership roles have changed a lot, even in the 10 years since I've been out of the classroom. I had a class of 39 year 5 children. Writing was a huge area of focus within the school. We were starting to embrace tech a little bit, but I really couldn't find quite the right solution for me. So that was one factor, I guess. I was looking for something that didn't exist. And the second factor, being brutally honest, is I was only sort of mid to late 30s at the time and just didn't envisage a life of being a head teacher and perhaps not staying as a deputy head for 30 years. So that was a second big factor. And then I guess I've always been pretty mission driven, and I was getting a little bit disillusioned with quite a lot of the paperwork that was in education and not things that were necessarily impacting on kids. So again, I always had the back of my mind, if I could impact more than just my school or my class, then that would be a mission I wanted to go on. And, obviously proud 10 years later to be chatting to you, knowing that we've worked in schools all over the world, really.
Amazing. So people are going to be out there going, well, what is Pobble?
Yeah, so it's our mission is to inspire children to write. So right from the very beginning, we've always wanted to, I guess, tackle a subject which is tough. Those of you listening that have taught children to write before, there's so many components to it. And being honest, it's not always that exciting to teach writing, particularly with things like SPAC. So the mission's always been to inspire children. As a former school leader, it's always been to help teachers as well. So in its essence, although the platform's changed a little bit over the last few years, we've always looked to provide prompts as a motivation for the children to write. So giving them something really interesting and exciting to write about, particularly thinking about those children that are reluctant to put pencil to paper or to start typing a story for the first time. So we provide a free daily image and a resource with prompts to support the students. But also, again, thinking about teacher workload and, supporting colleagues and, teachers that we connect with, a resource that was relatively easy for teachers to use as well. So, in essence, writing inspiration, easily used, accessible in, any classroom in the world, really.
Yeah. And it is, again, I saw it when you spoke 2 years ago, and I imagine it's changed a little bit since then as well. And one of the things in this mini series that we're going through in a podcast, and yes, it is an audio podcast. However, the beauty of this, and this is where I'd say, look, you need to come and watch this, because now, through the advancements of technology, we're going to get you to take us through the interface and show us and talk us through some of these features that allow teachers to work with students to develop their writing. So in this one, just show us some of these main features
Yeah,
that
of course.
support teachers and students in developing these writing skills.
Absolutely. So I think in thinking of change, as I'm loading up my screen. Yeah, so this is a resource called Pobble 365. So the goal when we first created Pobble was to have an image every day. We wanted that image to be free, and it remains free to this day. So anybody can sign up and access today's free Pobble 365 lesson. But we wanted the images to be quite quirky and interesting. So again, if I was to scroll to tomorrow's, you'd see a different image. And again, we continue to scroll. And advances in technology have meant that, one, we are able to now track more carefully the types of images that are more popular with the students. So those of you that haven't been to Pobble for a long while, you will definitely see a change in the images that we're using. Obviously, the beauty of AI is that we can now use technology behind the scenes to enhance and create even better images. So that's one thing. You know, the quality of the images, we really pride ourselves on in that, yeah, they're quirky, they're interesting, and above all else, that will inspire your children to write. And then scrolling down a little bit further, Alex, what you will see is underneath each image, there's a ready-made set of writing activities. So again, as experienced school leaders and teachers, we try to think about, well, what are the things that will really help a child to write a good story? And I would say at this point, a lot of our focus is on creative writing. Creativity, again, is, you know, I'm a big believer in children having that opportunity to use their imaginations. And, you know, that's something we're obviously very passionate about. And then alongside things like the story starter, there are sentence starters, there are word banks, because again, we know that vocabulary is a challenge in lots of schools. And there are questions to discuss about the images as well. So there's a ready-made set of activities available and accessible, you know, each and every day. And I would say that's the number one most used resource. Now, where it's perhaps evolved a little, Alex, since you saw it a couple of years ago, and obviously as technologies change, and certainly COVID changed a lot for us as an organisation, is traditionally Pobble would be something that was, you know, presented on a screen in the classroom. To be honest, it will be a PowerPoint type presentation, children sitting around and watching. But what we've also been able to do over the last few years is to think more carefully about, well, how we use schools using Seesaw, for example, or Google Classroom. You can pop a Pobble lesson directly into those applications now. In the same way, if your children have a device with a camera on, you can download a QR code and the children can scan. And way we've not tried to add loads and loads more content. We've tried to think about how can we use the content that's there, make it better, using obviously some of the technology mentioned, but also from an accessibility perspective, how can we just make it easier for teachers to get it in the hands of the students? So yeah, they were the key highlight. Possibly, you know, having listened to lots of your episodes around AI in particular, something we've been working on more recently is how you can then also use technology behind the scenes to make all of the activities easier and harder with the click of a button. And again, that's using AI behind the scenes to do that. So yeah, that probably gives you enough food for thought. Is that okay?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, if we can just stick with that a second. So I'm curious with this one then, because obviously the ability to send this out to students, like what you've just shown me there in terms of this differentiation of activity, or at least adapting an activity straight off the bat, which is, again, I'm talking to a lot of people about this and where differentiation is versus what adaptability is. And you know, if I know I have a student, I would pre-plan, and differentiating there is sort of the pre-planning part, whereas the adapting is something we can do on the fly.
Yeah.
And so being able to, as you've seen, push this out to students, are they able to then choose, like you had there, easier, normal, harder, or is a teacher able to set that for individual students and it changes for them on the screen? How would that work?
Yes, there's a few different ways. So if I'm being honest, a lot of teachers take what we've already written and they make different versions. So for example, here, I'm using the harder version. I can add that to my lessons. So I've now cloned a copy of that presentation. So I've now got the harder version. and I know which students perhaps I want to direct this towards. So if I now open up this particular version of the presentation, there are a few things I can do here. I can immediately then share it with them. So I can, obviously, the children that need that particular presentation, I can send that version to them. Going a little bit further in terms of adapting, all of the presentation slides also have the power for the teacher to then make individual tweaks and changes as well. So as a very quick example, I'm a big believer in actually starting work with teachers. I always say, we've given you, I believe, a really sound basis, but that ability to either tweak easier and harder with a single click, or to go one step further and add your own adaptations. You can add your own slides, you can edit the content that's there. And then with all of those, going back to the sharing options, every single presentation that you clone or change, there's always that ability to make a version then that you send to the students. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm now thinking about it from, even though this is probably geared more towards primary students than secondary students, there are still secondary students who would benefit from this. And, we know comprehension, oracy, they kind of link together, but those are important skills that are always going to be needed and still need developing. So I'm thinking of it from my area of science. So if I was a primary teacher, if I was a teacher and I was using this, and obviously we've got the free elements, which is fantastic, go on and use.
Yeah.
But do you have then, let's say, pre-made resources, or if I wanted to embed this into my curriculum, I'm going, right, I want to do some writing in science with this. Are there any pre-made resources that you can have? So if you are subscribing to this and using it, I can go, right, science-wise, I'm talking about, I don't know, plants or something along those lines. Is there something that you've got then that will allow me to develop students' writing skills within that area?
Yeah, so there's a few things that probably would help in terms of that. I won't open up all the links for now, but as an example, the big advantage with Pobble 365, and you can see we're very visual, is that by being a subscriber, you're not limited to only today's. So you can scroll back or scroll forwards, and obviously in a much easier way than going left and right clicking, I can start to see the images that might engage my students. And that might be topic related. That might simply be, well, this looks quite quirky. So there's the Pobble 365 element that is really, really popular. Alongside that, we also have our topic rights. Now, again, we're probably more primary focused with the topic rights. But again, what we do here, and I'm happy to share a link with you afterwards, Alex, is all of the topic rights are linked to the English national curriculum. So Pobble 365 we see used and embraced with in all countries, to be honest. We don't see it as a scheme. We see it as an add-on in a way if you're looking to promote creativity. With the topic rights, we're definitely more focused on that cross-curricular writing element. So again, as a science teacher, as a history teacher, you can see some pretty standard topics. And again, with differentiation in mind, we don't have 30 year 6 topics. We have 34 topics that are all available for every year group. I'm a big believer that if you have a child who's 9 that really needs to be accessing materials that are designed for a 7-year-old, then you should be able to access them. So that sort of adaptation, as you mentioned, is really, really important to us. In the same way, the age to 10 and 11 resources, we see used quite heavily within the secondary sector as well. And again, going back to Pobble 365 and the secondary element, we know that, for example, on the GCSE paper, one of the big tasks is responding to an image. There's probably not a better image prompter resource out there than Pobble 365. So it's used quite heavily in English GCSE classrooms, although, again, we see ourselves very much as a primary-based platform.
That's fantastic. Like, in terms of what's available there. So, and again, I'm just really going through this because I'm fascinated by it. If I'm a teacher, and again, you must go out into schools and work with them, not just say that this is our product, but actually support and develop and work with them. How would I go about integrating and embedding this into a lesson? Like, what's the professional development you offer in this, and the advice that you give, teachers who are at the start of their journey and schools who are at the start of the journey of bringing Pobble into their classrooms?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we do. One, I've sort of flagged it on the screen there, but I'm super passionate about the sort of CPD side of of running an EdTech company. I think it's one of the biggest challenges, I have to say, with embracing any new tech. So the way that we've gone about it is we run lots and lots of live webinars and live CPD sessions. So everything from 7 ideas to inspire your class to write, which then link to how can Pobble fit with that, to schools that are looking just to inspire every child, so they come along and it's more Pobble specific. In terms of the resource itself, going back into the platform, what I tend to do is I start with I've sort of got a very simple mantra of search, save, edit, and share. So the very first steps are spend a little bit of time searching the calendar for something you think that would inspire your students. Have a go at saving a lesson. Try and edit it in some way, as demonstrated a moment ago, and share it with your class. Once you've done that once, you will immediately see the benefit. And then you'll start to see, well, where does that fit with your curriculum? And in answer to your question, there are lots of ways. We have schools that have free write Fridays. Obviously, certain regions that might be free write Thursday, but we have the sort of free writing element. We have schools, and the reason we call it Pobble 365, that build in a 10-minute window for writing every day. So where they've looked and saw that writing is a focus on their school development plan, they build in a 10-minute window of time, and that's obviously where all the small activities come into play. And then we do have schools that use us when it's a narrative section of their curriculum, and they say, right, we might use a high quality text, but we might also use an image as our sort of stimulus for writing for that term. So yeah, in answer to your question, one of the reasons we're very adamant it's not a scheme is that it can be used in different ways depending upon the priority of the school. But that's where the webinars come in, Alex. That's where it's a good opportunity to really think about your own setting and, in a way, how does it best support you?
Amazing. So thinking about it now, for me as a teacher, I'm going to use this. But what I'm kind of getting the impression of here is it's the teacher alongside the technology rather than the technology leading everything, because I say I like the look of the octopus. Really that octopus image that you had there.
Yeah, sorry.
It's fantastic. And it's like, right, we're going to use that. We're going to talk about something like that in science. And the kids go off and write. But then I'm assuming that the marking and the feedback and the parts where there needs maybe some of a human touch, but that would come from me as the educator rather than the Pobble system itself.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, being honest, we had some great tools within the platform where we could send lessons to students. We are a huge believer in assessment for learning, so we had some amazing peer feedback tools. But what we found, and you probably had this on some of your other sessions as well, is schools, because we were a writing-only platform, they were already embedding Google Classroom, and they already had writing rubrics that they already had embedded into other tools, and similarly schools using Seesaw. So again, we took a step back, because it's very easy to think you have to do everything, to say, well, actually, you probably already got a good system in place for developing some of these, these features, the peer feedback, the assessment for learning. Actually, we're just going to make it really easy for you to put our content into a tool that you already use. And then obviously, aside from the tech, the teacher delivery in a way, I think it's really important that we still give teachers that power to deliver the lesson in the way that's right for them. So again, how the children respond. I'm coming out to Dubai in a few weeks. A lot of the schools I work out there are very fortunate that students do have access to devices. I was in a school earlier this week where they don't have many devices at all. So we have to cater for the school that's writing in books, but also the school that's using technology. And that's obviously the place that we're spending all of the time in education.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious by it now, in terms of, I suppose I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
Your 40-second elevator pitch, like there's obviously schools, you've said it already, and I've seen it, but there are schools all around the world using this.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're using it?
So I think the fact we've done a lot of the legwork in a way, but still given the freedom to do a bit of teaching at the end. So, I think we've got some of the best images. I think we've really carefully thought through the activities that link with those images, the ease of which they can access that content, and then going back to our earlier discussion, the ability that we've really thought about how they then get to the students really quickly. So again, my thinking is probably 80% of what teachers need to do deliver a lesson is already there. Actually, what I like the fact they can do is spend that 20% of time thinking about, well, which version is right for my students? How do I tweak it and adapt it? We've already done sort of some of the heavy lifting in a way for them. So that's why I think it looks nice. It's easy to use. I think that's often understated in EdTech, but I'd like to think our platform is super simple, which again, I think sometimes people overcomplicate things. I think the simplicity of the platform really helps teachers as well.
Yeah, that's always the fewer clicks, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's say I'm not hard-faced, but let's just say I am more, in terms of facts and figures, evidence. I'm there's going to be a cost to this. What's the evidence? Why should I pay this money to use this? What's the evidence you've got that supports, the Pobble, the platform? Why the other schools are using it, so that I, as a school leader, a CEO, whatever it may be, could justify and have faith in spending the money on it?
Yes, again, I could probably spend hours on this, but we've been very fortunate, I think, as an organisation to run alongside some really successful programs here in the UK. So Innovate UK, Educate, Microsoft Accelerator. So again, we've worked with trusted partners. In a lot of those cases, the only way that you can get a grant is by showing that your product impacts. So we were able to prove, one, at the time, saving teachers time was a really key metric. But also the fact that children were writing more, they were more excited to write. In a way, going back to our mission about inspiration, for me, they were the most important things. Were children more excited to write? And we measure that. And were they writing more as an outcome of using Pobble over a sustained period of time? We've obviously then got the anecdotal evidence around, the feedback from the schools themselves. So I would always encourage anybody that was looking at Pobble to go and just speak to another school that's worked with us. And, you only have to follow us on any social media platform to see that. But also then, talking to school leaders to talk about how they've rolled it out. And then the final bit I point people towards is the blog. Again, we share lots of user stories on there. So again, coming from teachers themselves, school leaders, about how they've rolled out Pobble in their own setting. Some schools really focus on the resources. We have a huge part of the platform, which is about writing celebration and that motivation to become a published author. We have over 500,000 pieces of published writing on Pobble. So again, even that's probably evidence of use of the platform. It's probably one of the biggest collections of children's writing in the world. Hopefully a few things in there, Alex. There's the data side of it. There's the sort of headline stories, the case studies. But as I say, I would give some of the articles and social media elements of Pobble a little bit of a follow as well.
Yeah, because that's, I suppose, when you look at these things, we really do want to see the impact. And I say this because there are a plethora of EdTech, platforms out there now, and with AI that's come through, I reckon it's quadrupled, if not more, within the past 18 months about the number of platforms that have, all of a sudden come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And so the one thing we always want to see with this is, what's the impact? Where's the progress? And be able to say, well, we're using this so that students can. And that's kind of my big takeaway with anything EdTech innovation, anything to do with platforms like this, is when we look at it, when we're talking to people about it, we're going to say, look, use this so that students can.
Yeah.
So from your side, if we're still pitching this, if you're going to fill in the blank, as it were, or finish my sentence of so that students can, what would you say? Why should we use Pobble so that students can?
Yes, I think so students can become better writers. I think not every child finds writing really easy. We work with our Connects organisation, National Literacy Trust in the UK. They produce a report every year about writing, and results are declining. Children's motivation to write is at one of the lowest it's ever been. Obviously, technology is changing things in terms of, students picking up pencils, writing in books. So I think around that sort of creativity element and just knowing that it's an issue, I think if you were to speak to most school leaders, they would say, writing's tough. So I think that's we will make writing easier. We will make writing better, I think will be the thing that I would say.
That's a great answer. I've been drawn my attention to the timetable rock stars. Even I know what that is, having 2 young children.
Yeah, so I think going back to sort of a sort of follow up to your previous thing about, that trust, and I couldn't agree more about how many different platforms are coming. I think one thing we've really worked on over the last 12 months are working with other partners. So, finding opportunities to collaborate. We're a very small organisation. There's only 6 people in our team, and people are often amazed. They think we're much bigger than we are, perhaps. But I think that opportunity to connect, people on a joint mission. So, I'm very fortunate. I know Bruno at TT Rockstar as well. So last week we did a special writing prompting to TT Rockstars. We've been very fortunate coming back to, why are we the best? The BBC 500 Words competition relaunched last year. Out of a number of providers, we were chosen as a key partner. And obviously their competition was about writing inspiration. So again, I think those partnerships, again, are really important. And, I would look as an outsider, as a school leader, to say, okay, if they're working with that brand and that organisation, they must be doing something right. And, you recognise TT Rockstars like a lot of people do as well.
Definitely. Well, it's amazing. Thank you so much for showcasing that and taking us through it. It's, just the imagery that you say you've got there is captivating, I think, is probably the best word I would use to describe it. So looking to the future then, like what's next for Pobble? What sort of features or updates are starting to excite you, and how does things look as we start to move past that horizon?
Yes, I think I think like a lot of EdTech companies, Alex, we try to do too much. So we try to come back to what's our core, and that's probably why I've hammered on about the writing inspiration. So I think continuing to make the core product, the Pobble 365 elements, continuing to make it better. We've tried things like using AI to add voice to the story starter so that it can read it out. I don't think the AI we've used is quite there yet, but I don't think it'll be long before it is, and it adds that sort of human element, particularly thinking about how it can be accessed at home as well as in school. I think that's an important thing to consider. We're looking at how it can be translated into other languages, and obviously there's tools out there. So again, thinking about your region, we know that teachers are using those images, but in Arabic lessons, we know that it's being used in international schools. So again, how can we take something that's already good, but translate it into other languages to help the user? So that's something we're very much looking at. And then going back to the sharing, I think just being, always aware of what are the tools that schools are using, and how can we make it easier for our product to connect with another platform. So things like, we're using My Login now, so single sign-on for users. Again, that's a really important platform in terms of accessibility for the students getting into Pobble or the teachers. So again, trying to make what's there better, but also making it easier to use, I think is a really important step for us.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that a lot more now in terms of integration and collaboration on platforms. So whether you're an Office 365 school or whether you're a Google Classroom school, and just having that. Most of them now, it's when you click to log in, it is right, are you logging in via Google? You're going to log in via Microsoft. And it's that same thing in terms of use your school email, school password, and it's straight away in. And I saw that when you started assigning it to Google Classroom, which again, it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going further with Google, they've got the Google add-ons now. So again, thinking about how you can make it even more accessible within Google Classroom, because a big audience for us is Australia, for example, and all of the schools are using Google Classroom almost. So it's trying to think about the markets, the user experience. I'm definitely not a UX expert. I'm a teacher, but user experience is so important, I think, in an EdTech product.
Yeah, I mean, I might give you a story about mine. So I have a class of year 10s, and I'm more of a look, just put it up on the PowerPoint or Google Slides, and it's bland. It's just it's like it's the information that's key.
Yeah.
Some of the girls are like, sir, your presentations are so boring. It's like, and they didn't mean it in terms of content delivery. They just meant to look at, like a UX type of thing. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago, just went on to Canva and just like, right, let's set a template. Let's have this. So and you start to anchor things. So it's like certain colors, certain images for what is critical thinking, what is collaboration task, what's a retrieval task. And they're like, oh, this is nice. I went, well, I took on board what you said. And it's fascinating for students because you could have the best content on there, but if it doesn't have that, that visual appeal and that hook, that draw in with the colors or the image itself that generates curiosity or lets them, and they like to look at it, they won't, will they? They're just like, they'll switch straight away, switch off.
Absolutely.
So let's just say I was a genie with my magic wand and I came to you and said, you could have any dream feature added to Pobble, no constraints. Like, what would you choose to have and why?
I think at the moment, and obviously it is possible already, but that ability to quickly change it into other languages, I think at the moment would be a big changing point. And obviously we're exploring it. I think that will be one key element. I'd love to make it free for everybody, but you don't create a business by making it free. But going back to the mission, you follow me on LinkedIn, Alex. I'm very mission driven. My own children, my story. That will be the other thing. I'd love to live in a world where the best tools you could make more accessible to schools, because the stark reality is budgets are tough everywhere at the moment. So I think we've tried to do everything in our powers to make it. It's £300 for a school subscription now, which I don't think is a huge amount of money for what they're getting. But in an ideal world, the mission is for as many people as possible to access it, hence it being free every day.
Yeah, and it's the fact that you do that, I think, shows that you care. I think if you didn't and have that passion and caring nature about it and real passion and drive for writing, which I think is very obvious for anyone who's gone through this episode and listened to you, or anyone who follows you on social media will know, purely how much you put into it and how much it means to you. Like, if you didn't, you wouldn't do it. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that, I think, and that says a lot about you as a person, and then I think Pobble as a business, but as a platform as well, that you can go on and still access something for free every day to help with writing, and then that's a big thing. And I think educators themselves appreciate things like that, rather than the big books companies where it's like you can't even get through the door sometimes. So we appreciate the fact that you do that, Simon. So thank you. Just to wrap this up then, and I wanted to think about key takeaway or something I wanted you to leave the listeners with, like the golden fruit, as it were. Think of this as the dessert of our conversation, where our start has been good, our main course has been delectable, but it's the dessert that counts. That is going to leave our lasting memory for people. What would be your one key takeaway about how Pobble could transform the writing process for students?
I'd say I keep going back to that word inspiration. We talk about that moment when a child just picks up the pencil for the first time and just goes, I can do this. I worked in a school with some really challenging pupils, and if we were to track the moments, the chairs went flying. If you're talking to a lot of people now, writing was the catalyst for a lot of those really challenging bits of behaviour. So yeah, if you have students that aren't necessarily motivated to write and you want a starting point, like a starter for 10, that's where I think we really fit the bill. The images are amazing and they're very well thought, and the activities that go with them are structured in a way that even if you don't enjoy teaching writing, they will guide you through, well, how could I deliver this lesson to my students? So yeah, that will be my takeaway. Use it as a starting point. Think about those reluctant writers. We all have them. And I think Pobble is the best resource out there for helping it.
Amazing. I'll give you the chef's kiss. There we go. Amazing. So if people want to come and find you, people want to learn more, people want to find out and follow you, where would be the best few places that they can come and reach you?
Yes, there's a few different things. We're very active as Pobble on social media. I myself, Simon Blower at Pobble. I think probably like lots of people, LinkedIn's become much more of a focus for us. If you are on LinkedIn, definitely give me a follow. A couple of other things to look out for. We do lots of live webinars and also live lessons. So I've not mentioned it earlier, but I actually take the lessons to life. I bring a Pobble 365 lesson to life. We had 12,000 students on our last live lesson. So we zoom into your classroom. we teach your children, we work them through the lesson. So look out for the next episode of that, which is in December with the brilliant Mark Anderson, who's going to be my guest host that day. So that will be another way. And then the third, I'm quite often out on the road. I'm very fortunate. I'm going to be running an English leaders event in Dubai in a few weeks' time. So if you have any English leaders listening, they can actually come and meet me in person. So that's the third way that you can get to meet me.
Amazing. Well, Simon, we appreciate you coming and speaking with us today and showcasing Pobble and the amazing work that you're doing, and just generally sharing that passion that you have for writing and education as a whole. So really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me on, Alex. It's I love listening to your podcast, and thank you for your support of what we're doing.